Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Scientific experts have discovered a new link between hair color and political ideology. For years, hair color was seen simply as a naturally occurring phenomenon that was both celebrated and embraced worldwide across the political spectrum. In recent years, however, with the introduction of science, hair dye, and internet insecurities, researchers have found that the color of your hair might actually reveal more about your political views than your voting record. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what your roots say about your beliefs. Joey Temprile is an informed, opinionated, passionate guy. He's co-host of the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. He's a millennial, husband, father, Bitcoiner, and we have the pleasure to discuss his takes on culture and society. We talk millennials, Bitcoin, faith, masculinity. Joey has a Catholic upbringing, but does not profess to be a Christian. So for Mark and I, it's always interesting to see where these conversations go. There are commonalities and differences in our worldviews, and those will come out on the show. And this episode marks 2 years of valiant efforts by Mark and myself to be podcasters. Based on our track record and current trajectory, I would probably say we have several more years to go before we figure out how to do this. If you're new to the show, go back and listen to some of the early episodes. There's a lot of timeless information, not just current events, that can help you on your journey stewarding everything God has given you. You can listen to Joey and his co-host Len at the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. I encourage you, if you're new to Bitcoin, head over there to learn, grow, stay up to date on the latest in the Bitcoin space. Joey and Len are always eager to help you out if you have Bitcoin questions. As always, if you enjoy this episode, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but it is valuable for listening amusement purposes. And now, Joey Temprile.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. I'm your co-host, Mark. I'm here with Brent.
Morning, Mark.
And we have a very special guest. We've been waiting to get this fella on for a little while. We have, can we say your whole name?
Sure,
Joey,
yeah, absolutely.
Guy incognito?
No, I've been fortunate enough to go on some like nationally syndicated shows, so they don't really accept names or first name only. So you go ahead.
So you're fully doxxed.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we want to welcome Joey Temprile.
Temprile's okay, yeah, you're close.
Temprile.
My Nona would say it like that, Temprile, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We like the old country here. So, and Joey's one of the hosts of the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast that we hold near and dear, along with Len. And we don't need to say his last name. But,
he has not been doxxed, yeah.
And I mean, if you've listened to the show, you know my fondness for current events and takes on culture and society. And I think Joey shares the same thing. So we're going to get into some of that today. We want to talk about millennials, my favorite punching bag. Now, I notice you don't have purple hair, Joey. So, I mean,
I've been lucky. I escaped that trap probably by a couple of years, right? I think. Yeah. If what is the year where purple hair? First of all, thanks for having me. Really nice studio. Blah blah blah. All that stuff. What is the year when you think that sort of nonsense started? The purple hair.
It's got to be post 2000.
I think it's like born after 2000, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say like 2005 probably.
Yeah.
We always talk about the avocado toast too.
Oh yeah.
But I think that might be a slightly different, like that kind of arose.
Different demo?
Yeah, different demographic.
Did you see, let's just hop right in. Did you watch the election coverage last night?
No.
So watching the election coverage on CBC.
I was making a costume for my kids.
That's right. You said that. Yeah. Chirp, chirp. The CBC coverage had sort of the rolling, I guess you call it riding by riding data. And so you always had on the left-hand side, taking up about 2/3 of the screen, the candidate that was in the lead, and then the 3 trailing candidates or nearest trailing candidates. I'm sure some ridings had 4 or 5. I know mine did. And in almost every case, the NDP candidate was either overweight, had colored hair, or some kind of like body piercing. And I couldn't help but think that this is a sign that these types of people truly do. It's not just me making it up. It's not anecdotal. They are gravitating to one political ideology, and it's the one of victimhood, handouts, help me, don't help yourself. And anything that's like worth any valor or worth any salt, or you've done something to better your situation, your family situation, frowned upon. I don't think it's fair to say anymore for people who are defending this sort of like lifestyle, ideology, whatever, that it's just a coincidence these people all vote extreme left. This is like, there's a real chicken and egg discussion to be had now about, is this ideology breeding these kinds of people, or are these people breeding that kind of ideology? In either case, they're not doing each other any favors. These people can't find jobs. They can't win elections. They don't have families. They are complaining about their financial situation. They're the loudest of any of those groups online. Something's got to change there. And it's not because I don't like NDPs or I don't like, the color purple. I wouldn't pick it from my hair, obviously, but that's not why. It's because if we have too many people heading that direction, broader society has a problem that's going to be hard to come back from. I'm surprised. Yeah, I mean, you were busy, I guess, but I'm surprised you guys didn't watch that. It was like, it's great content. Watching CBC anchors try and cope and seethe about Doug Ford. Oh, he didn't have as many seats as last time, but we did win another majority.
So you're thinking it's not necessarily an age-related thing; it's more of an ideology.
Yeah. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to separate the two now. I mean, can you separate the two?
I don't know. Yeah, I would say no, because an ideology can impact like every aspect of your life, right? And if you're leaning towards like you said, victimhood, right? Where hey, help me. I see this a lot in my day to day when I'm interacting with tenants, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm dealing with, I post an ad, I see like, hundreds of people respond, and right away you get a cross section of, okay, like this is a young couple. They probably vote this direction and they're going to buy a house in 2 years. You can just tell, right? And this other guy, like, no profile picture, or his profile picture is like, some absurd thing. And it's like, you can right away tell, like, you are trying to be a victim. And I can totally see it.
It's crazy. And even the victimhood party of choice, like for this, whatever, punching bag session, NDP, in Hamilton Center, they ran a woman in the last cycle named Sarah Jama. Stop me if you've heard this before, right?
Okay. I looked at this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting story because Sarah is sort of like NDP straight flush, like black woman, disabled, and just hates capitalism. Like you could not do any better than that as a candidate for the NDP. And she did well in the last election. She won going away. When the Israel invasion happened, what year was that? 22, I think, right? 22 or 23, I forget now, but one of those years, she had something to say on Twitter. I would guess because of her Muslim faith. I'm not saying 100%, but I'm guessing it has something to do with it, that she sided with Hamas more or less. You could feel one way or the other about that conflict. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But that was too far afoot for the NDP, or too far afield for the NDP, and they cut her loose. And she spent the better part of a year trying to get back into the party on the basis of all the things that got her elected in the first place. They're getting me out even though I'm black, even though I'm Muslim, even though I'm a woman, even though I'm disabled, even though...
Yeah, she's got all the checkpoints.
But the thing is that those parties actually only care about those checkpoints insofar as it's a power, it's protecting their power. They don't care about those checkpoints if you're costing them votes. And so even those parties that embrace victimhood as a means of empire building,
you're still disposable.
Absolutely. If you can't win, you ain't for us. And she finished fourth in that riding yesterday.
Yeah, she got killed,
crushed. Yeah. And so, even those parties who understand that is their base, they don't really want you in there unless you're going to win or come close to winning or grow the party a little bit. It's like, the people, when the chips are down, even the people who talk about victimhood as a benefit, like a beneficial thing, they don't want you involved. They want winners. They want people who are faking this stuff to win. Guys like Matt Green is another one.
Donald Trump.
Oh. You like Trump?
No, just winning, more winning.
And winning till you're going to get so tired of winning. Your head's going to be spinning from winning. Print the shirts, man. I look at that party in the States, like the MAGA party. I wouldn't even call them Republicans at this point. They've completely shifted directions toward what his goals are, right? I look at that party and I look at the disdain for them from some Canadians. And I want to know, like, what is it about that party you don't like? You can disagree with the politics. That's fine. No problem, okay? If you want to disagree with some of the politics, I'm never going to have an issue with that. But when you start talking about, I disagree with the ends justifying the means the way they seem to in Megaland, I would just point again to stuff like this NDP candidate. You didn't care about this. You don't seem to care about the liberals delaying democratic processes one after another in favor of, king making this guy who, by the way, I'm not an insider. How many outsiders have pictures with Epstein and Ghislaine? You know anyone in that? Like, what's that Venn diagram? I'll tell you, there's no touching in that Venn diagram, okay? None. And so, like, when this guy talks about he's an outsider, people don't seem to care, right? They're like, yeah, he's never been elected. He's never been a politician. He's never been an MP. He's arm's length from Trudeau. We got to give this guy a shot. Again, like the things you're saying about one party winning at all costs, you don't seem to apply to your own chosen party here. And that's why there's so much, the reason there's so much division is because people ignore otherwise logical people ignore that part of their brain when it comes to politics. It's become so divisive. It's everywhere now. I can't talk to my in-laws or my dad or my mom or like my brother, some of my friends. They just don't get it, right? And again, you can disagree with the politics, but it's the tactics where people seem to have the most disagreement. And I just don't understand why. Everyone's doing the same thing. It's just whether or not your jersey is winning on the scoreboard at the end of election night, at the end of the cycle, whatever. It's all this stuff has a place, I think, in any competitive society, but it's overrun now productive discussions to the point where it's counterproductive. It's got to stop. Does it not? Am I crazy there?
I think we made the point as well that like most of this is virtue signaling when it comes to the political front.
Sure.
Right? Trudeau has, he's great. He talks a great game about equality and diversity, et cetera, right? Look at the Liberal leadership race.
I know.
There is at least a woman in there.
Yeah.
But she's white.
2 women, right? 2. Karina's in there too. Karina and Christia both.
Oh, I forgot about Christia.
Yeah. Third place.
There are 2 women in there, but they're both white. And like, I don't care. Whoever, it's merit-based for me.
They're saying it.
What's that?
It's that they're saying it. They're saying they care about diversity.
Yeah. So then where are your minority candidates?
They booted them both out.
They got kicked out. And for the one guy I can kind of see because he was just terrible.
Chandra or whatever?
Yeah, Chandra Arya.
He got a nice position with Brookfield as a...
is it him? I think it's his son, isn't it?
I mean, one of them. But you make of that what you will. The guy has to lead the Liberal race for leadership, and someone who looks an awful lot like him, but 15 years, 20 years younger, with the same last name, ends up in a leadership position at Brookfield overseas.
Yeah, exactly.
Congratulations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's virtue signaling, but I think what it comes down to, this is my view, is that really these politics, the virtue signaling, the wokeism, whatever, like it's not sustainable. And once you get into any kind of position, you realize that it's not sustainable, right? And like you were talking about, how come you guys didn't watch the video coverage or whatever, right? Because I was doing stuff, man.
Yeah, productive people.
And this is the difference, right? I was working, actually, to evict somebody, but
you are the enemy of half the country.
Capitalism, in Sarah Jam riding, no less. Right, but then I also had to go get my son from it's like a Scouts program run through our church, right? So it's like, because people like us are, and I'm not saying we're the greatest, but I think you kind of get it, right? We're productive citizens, and we don't have time to do a lot of this stuff. Just look at the protests in the States, right? How they have dwindled and how hilarious they are. I don't know if you've seen any of them, Brent, but it's like these middle-aged women singing protest songs, like trying to relive the Pete Seeger days of the 60s. I did see
that. You might have tweeted that.
Yeah, it's possible, right? Yeah. And there's like 20 people there, right? Whereas before, when there's funding through the U.S. government, no less, you would have these massive, massive crowds and like pallets. Yeah, I don't know if you believe the conspiracy stuff, but like pallets of bricks.
How much of it is conspiratorial now? Like the Renta riots over 2020, 21, 22. And it's not like, by the way, there's again, thinking people do not consider these things to be legitimate. George Floyd, drug addict, woman beater, porn star, and died of a fentanyl overdose.
Hero, you forgot Hero.
Yeah, no comment on that. I don't know much about the guy. I've seen statues erected for less, honestly, but
he's not in your Venn diagram.
Yeah, I don't know where the touching circles are there. He dies of a fentanyl overdose. The coroner says as much, and a cop goes to jail. You can debate with me about whether the cop used excessive force. That is a separate discussion about what caused the death, right? Then what caused the death? Number one. You may recall around the same time there was the Jesse Smollett, cruising around some mega town, and a couple of guys came up to me and said, "This is MAGA country," and stole my Subway sandwich or something, or whatever that was. Punched him in the eye. He lied about that. Then there was the NASCAR one. The NASCAR one, particularly egregious. NASCAR issues a statement about a noose in a shop on the track. We got to find out what the noose. Who put this noose here? This is clearly a garage door pulley. We don't know. Are you really telling me NASCAR doesn't know what a garage door pulley looks like? Are we? And so you gotta wonder, like, who's leaning on NASCAR to make the statement about this garage door pulley potentially being a noose? Who's leaning on the Minnesota Police Department to put this guy in jail? Who's leaning on the forklift driver who's just, again, on a Friday afternoon, he's got to dump off 30 skids of bricks on a protest, at a protest? Like, who's leaning on him? Because none of those people are doing that. Nothing is organic. And, this USAID thing, this guy, Mike Benz, who's on every podcast now, I don't know where this guy came from, but, he makes a lot of good points about when you look at the people who in the last 5 years have been criticized in their professional circles, family circles, faith circles, they're conspiracy theorists, they're tinfoil hat types, they're too smart by a half, whatever. It turns out that really you've been interacting with a, government-funded freak show, Truman Show, at basically every turn. You turn the TV on, Truman Show. Go to a protest, Truman Show. Government elected official, Truman Show. War overseas, Truman Show. Trans Sesame Street in Iraq, Truman Show. Like whatever we did here, right? We did something stupid here too with foreign aid. Those people were all vindicated. And so when you talk about whether or not you're vindicated on some of your viewpoints, the thing you have to ask yourself is it reasonable now to assume that things you see on TV, whether they are pro or against your viewpoint, is it reasonable to assume that they're fake too? This is why I think the religious community gets so much right, okay? I am not religious. Hold your tomatoes, listeners and viewers. But I will say that one of the things that the church community gets right is that you don't need to find fake community with fake allegiances online or politically or whatever. People in your church, people you sit next to on Saturdays. Sundays. Some denominations go Saturdays. The people you sit next to on Sundays, it doesn't matter what that guy's political stripe is, because it's going to be guided by the same core values that you have, right? And that sense of community is why you don't see, what is your denomination? Are you Dutch Reform?
Canadian Reform.
Something
you could just
like
say
that.
Reform.
Okay, Reform. That community, you don't see them picketing, protesting, rioting, demanding additional flags hung in classrooms and whatnot. You don't see that because that community is so tightly knit and understands that person to person, 95, 96% of the values are the same. Yeah, some of you might like the Habs, some of you might like the Leafs, but it's not going to affect the way you raise your kids. You're not worried about sending your kids to that guy's house for dinner or whatever, right? And that's missing now big time. And I think a lot of people need to realize that the allegiances they thought they had really are built on foundations of sand here, USAID money or whatever other sort of government funded. They're not real. The only thing real is the thing you do day to day, the people you see every day, the guy who shovels your driveway when you're at work, right? The guy who comes to stop the cars with what do you call those guys? They're called crossing guards.
Almost forgot. I need one of those guys who shovels my driveway.
The crossing guards, yeah, well... maybe you're not as aligned with your church mates as you thought, but the crossing guards, like, who stop traffic in your neighborhood for the kids to go, like, that's the guy you see every day. That's the woman you see every day. That's what matters. That's the allegiance that's not psyoped into your life through television or radio or media or whatever, right? People have to realize
so how have you personally kind of come across these viewpoints?
Bitcoin, 100% Bitcoin.
Yeah?
100%.
Because...
yeah.
Like I'm looking at, okay, if you just look at the broader culture, like if somebody gets sucked into a worldview and they dye their hair pink or whatever,
yeah,
right? Like they're getting certain information, they're digesting, maybe it's their background, they're like the way they brought up, maybe it's just, I don't know, right? But like for you, how has your kind of life come say like, hey, I identify this as, this is real, this is not, or?
That's a good question. Bitcoin played a big role. I think
because that might be surprising to some of our listeners who don't know the Canadian Bitcoin podcast.
Yeah, I'll
what,
say
Bitcoin. What do you mean?
Well, because Bitcoin it leads you.
It's made up.
And you guys have spoken about this too, right? Bitcoin, if it does nothing else for you, it helps you become a critical thinker, a critical, observer, digester of everything in your life, news, relationships. Does the guy who's shoveling your driveway have an ulterior motive? Like you will be asking these questions.
So how does
more.
that work? Like why?
So like the thing is, like in Bitcoin, you basically have a group of people who are unwilling to accept things that have been told to them as gospel over the last, 30, 40 years, whatever, right? Most Bitcoiners, let's say, are under 40. And it stems from, the sort of entry point is economic theory. Inflation is not only good, but it's required. Currency is meant to be spent, not saved. You're luckier to have a job than you are to have a retirement, things of this nature. These things, by the way, quotes from high-ranking officials. Christine Lagarde in the ECB said that you're luckier to have a job. You don't need savings or retirement plan. You need work. Okay, well, that might work for you, but not for me. And when it comes to other stuff, Bitcoiners have this same critical eye. The big one that really, I think, brought a lot of people who would, by the way, have otherwise just been perfectly happy to live in this world of I'm getting richer holding Bitcoin and not care about anything else. It was COVID. Everyone became...
So were you into Bitcoin before?
Yeah. I started buying Bitcoin in like 2016 or 17. And I was there for the wrong reasons for like a year, just watching that number kind of float up and down. Maybe it'll go, maybe it won't. And, in a bear market, you have no choice but to consume content if you want to stay involved and up to date. And that was at a time when there was like block size wars and fork wars and Bitcoin Cash. We're off in the weeds here for your normal listening base, I'm sure, but research these things. This was a difficult time for Bitcoin. Nothing was guaranteed. And, when COVID came around, a lot of these same people who were making great cases against economic theories that you thought were entrenched and bulletproof started talking about stuff like lockdowns and masks and Fauci's role in the AIDS epidemic and things of this nature. These are indisputable. This is
like the Phillips curve theory.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And just totally got.
And people will still argue with you about things like this, but I think most common, I won't say common people, most people who are reasonable in 80% of their life, will understand now that things like locking down schools for 2 or 3 years was disastrous and will continue to show out as a disaster in the next decade, 2 decades. Things like keeping people home from work and giving them free money for 6 months, 8 months, 1 year, whatever it was. We did a couple of COVID payments here in the States. They did only one, but for a lot more people will be a disaster. Things like inflation is transitory. It's going away. Was a disaster, right? People are willing to accept that there's a discussion to be had there. And I think Bitcoiners, at least from my perspective, had a lot of that stuff first. And then when you can start talking about the vaccines and stuff like that. I have 2 shots. I regret getting those shots every day. I am lucky that I've had no health problems, but I know people who did have health problems after those shots, fainting spells, blood clots, not to mention there's I think a mental toll that it takes on you if you're not sort of strong-willed in terms of what you can keep in, keep out, from broader discussions about stuff like vaccine side effects and whatnot, right? You may think that every time your heart flutters a bit, it's vaccine related and not just that you had too many coffees that morning, right? And so like there's a lot of people who are struggling with this stuff years later. And from my point of view, Bitcoiners had a lot of that stuff first. And we weren't afraid.
And that's because of the economic.
It's because you have to have a critical eye when the government tells you something. This has been a core of every single political theory throughout history, save for communism maybe or Marxism. But everywhere else, everyone who talks about any tier of democracy, any democratic institution, there is always a spot for skeptical eyes on the government, skeptical ears when they tell you something about what's best for you, why you have to do something that's best for your country, all these things. And the sort of longer you go into history, the more you see that this has always been something we should be skeptical of. Whether it's, the Great Depression in the United States, lots of people talked about early on in the Depression how there was no depression. That was before widespread communication was so readily available. And so some people didn't know they were in a depression until it was too late. You're losing your job. You had no signs because everything on the news said things were great. You can go back to stuff like the moon landing. I don't know if that was real or not. I have no idea. I'm not willing to put my life on the line for anything at this point. I think that's a fair position to have. Recently, for
Flat Earth.
I will not do flat Earth. I don't know anything about that. I don't care about that. Doesn't matter to me as long
I'm
as
gonna see you with purple hair.
as long as I can,
t-shirt.
as long as I can fly to a warm location. I don't care if I have to fly in an elliptical or on a flat plane. Doesn't matter to me. But what I think about recently, you know, we've had some discussion about Fort Knox and auditing Fort Knox, right? What is in Fort Knox and what is under the United States Federal Reserve in New York in terms of gold? You know, when you talk about some of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, like power projection and this sort of, you know, the government being skeptical of what the government does, you know, that Fort Knox has only had 3 audits in its history. You can stop me if you've heard this before. I talked about this on the show last week or 2 weeks ago. They had one in 73 that was done by members of the media and some politicians, no experts. They didn't weigh any gold. They didn't test any gold. They just looked at it, something like 5%. Another one in 76 or 77, I forget the year. Media, again, we're going to open up some vault compartments, but only one. No experts. And then there was a third a few years after that, sort of in the same vein. That was all the post-71 audits that have been done at Fort Knox. You know, pre-71, when they went off the gold standard in the U.S., Fort Knox adding to the reserves was a spectacle of sorts. The U.S. used to roll in big army presence, large trucks that were quote unquote carrying the gold, rolled them into Fort Knox. It was a power projection thing. Now, when people say, well, there's no way that, you know, we could go even further, like to Russia, Ukraine. There's no way Ukraine's losing that war. Russia's lost 1 million people, blah, blah, blah. Every U.S. media outlet is constantly talking about how this is a war that's going to be won by Ukraine. We have to keep supporting them. It's all power projection. And, you know, when you think about Bitcoiners getting this stuff right, there was economic power projection for a long time that turned out to be not true. And so when you started seeing power projection in terms of you have to get the vaccine, we have to be the most vaccinated country, we need this to protect people, to protect grandma, to protect families, the first thing that Bitcoiners thought was, is this actually true? Show me the data to show me this is true. The same way that I show you data about inflation destroying savings, destroying livelihoods. The same way I show you that home prices lead to less family formation. The same way I show you that, you know, people who go to church have higher success rates in relationships and family. Like these things are data-backed, data-driven outcomes. There was no data for this stuff. And if it wasn't for something like Twitter, how would anyone have known that during COVID? How many more people would have gotten those shots? How many more people would still be getting boosters today? Because by the way, the guidance on boosters has not changed.
No.
So are we like, what are we on? 11, 12? How many? You're hammering these things like tequila shots at an all-inclusive resort. Okay. And there's a guy on TV, Fauci, who, if it was up to him, would have dozens of erected statues of himself all over the White House and other places. He's on the cover of Forbes, talking about how this thing worked. Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, also on the cover of GQ. You know, he's a hero. People who look at this stuff and think, I don't need to worry about what the government tells me. They're always looking out for me.
So what I'm curious is like, what makes a Bitcoiner like a realist? Like,
that's what we're talking about is reality.
Is it?
Yeah,
is
we're
it,
kind of
is
hovering
it pain?
around,
Is it
like-
pain? I think it might be pain. Bitcoiners, you come to Bitcoin through pain, I think, in a lot of ways.
well, because I think a lot of our audience doesn't own Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They've heard of it.
Unbelievable,
Like,
by the
whatever.
way.
But yeah, like maybe succinctly.
the people you cater this show to have the longest view of not only life but also death.
Eternity,
and no
yeah.
one is owning Bitcoin.
Well,
What is going on?
Well,
Let's not say no
a
one.
belief in eternal future overrides like any sorts of wealth.
Are there still blocks being minted in the eternal future? I don't know, but this is as close as we're gonna get. Okay, and so like I think it might be pain, Brent. Honestly, like.
Okay. So and that you think translates to a younger demographic,
Yeah.
who's like you mentioned, you kind of alluded to housing and family formation.
You have a younger brother.
Yeah.
Okay, he's doing well. Why is he doing well?
His values.
Yeah. And so we talked
And
earlier.
supportive
We talked earlier about
community.
some of the values that you see in people his age. Okay. Shout to Gideon. What values do you think those people have that are going to lead them in a direction where they're going to be successful on the back of like the pillars of hard work, faith, family, community?
Yeah. So I'm wondering, because like you kind of mentioned like, hey, I'm not Christian, I don't have faith, whatever. But to you, you kind of get these values from somewhere else. It's either been your life journey or it's Bitcoin. You kind of said it's Bitcoin, but like, what about Bitcoin?
We can go further back. I was raised Catholic, like I said. I still carry a lot of those values. I don't think the Catholic Church is where people should be like spending their Sundays, my opinion, but it doesn't stop you from believing in a higher power. It doesn't stop you from believing that there's order to things that seem chaotic day to day. I mean, in Bitcoin, what do we say all the time? Zoom out, right? The chart, if you look at a price chart, it's wild if you look at 1 hour. But if you zoom out, there's clearly some directionality here that's like identifiable to even the layperson, right? And so I think like in my faith life, I don't go to church anymore, but you're never going to catch me on one of these like, benders where people are saying, oh, there's no God, there's no that. I don't think that's true. And the way I was raised is an important part of that, right? My parents were Catholic and are Catholic, and they instilled values in me that I think had me looking at a longer time horizon, had me looking at things that are not so materialistic, not so in the moment, right? And I think, it's hard, especially for young men, the temptations of like, I would never speak like this on my podcast. I don't know how you guys got me to this, but the temptations of like the flesh, for example, in your 20s are almost impossible to overcome. If you're at all capable in a social situation, you will find yourself like in places that you did not necessarily want to be, and you will realize only later were not good for you in that moment. And so like your family has to instill those values in you. It doesn't mean you're going to hit, you're not going to bat 1,000 in those situations, but between hitting some of them into right field and getting on base and understanding that the ones you missed on were misses of your own doing, you will find yourself going down paths that lead you to stuff like Bitcoin, because you realize that like, not everyone was making these decisions at the bar when I was 19. Not everyone was making these decisions about finding a good place to work when I was 23. Not everyone was making decisions about trying to find a partner at 26, 27. They're still out partying. And now people are not making good decisions about investing. And so I have a choice. Like I can go to the bank like everyone else is doing, or I can look at this and, be curious about this and spend some time with this and research this. And you may find that the people who share your stripe don't really appear for you until you've made that correct decision 3, 4, 5 times over the course of a decade, right? You guys familiar with the story Isaiah's Job?
Oh, you sent me that.
You didn't read it? Good. It's a short story from the Atlantic in like the 30s, before the Atlantic was a globalist rag. And it's a story about a guy. It actually may be biblical at its base, but I don't think it's actually that Isaiah. And basically the story is about a guy who needs to move a mission forward. He's carrying, it might actually be the word of God that they're talking about in the story, but I don't think it's a Bible story. He's got to make a decision about how the best way to move the word of God is. Is it to get the most people on your side, to roll with the largest set of people who share some of the belief but not all of it, and so the message is watered down, and that whatever outcome that gives you, you go that direction? Or is it to be as extreme, as focused, and as true to the word as you can be, and watch as the real ball movers come to your side of whatever they're doing, whether they're politicians, whether they're net producers like you guys were talking about earlier. And so that's, I think a lot of people have that same struggle in their 20s. Like I said, men especially. Yeah,
because the temptation is to try to
go with the flow,
be popular
always. Yeah.
And change yourself to appeal to other people, right?
Yeah. Like, you guys did not go through this? Like, I don't want to.
I mean, the temptations are there,
yes,
right? But I mean, like
100%.
at 20, whatever, I think. I think I was maybe 5 years ahead of you for these different steps.
Yeah, I wasn't.
No?
No. No, like I definitely went through all that.
Yeah.
100%.
And like the thing, whether it's Bitcoin, like if you just think about Bitcoin as a community, maybe that's a better way to frame it. If you have a strong community around you, it's the people are making good decisions when it's the hardest, right? It's the people who, to quote a cliche here, if you're making good decisions when no one's looking, they're going to pay dividends in a way that you just cannot appreciate in the moment, but you will see over time.
It's like those dumbbells. I use those when you're not looking.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, sure. What is that? There's like a old philosophical experiment or thought experiment, right? Where the dumbbells may be moving as long as you're not looking at them. You can't really tell. Schrodinger's dumbbells, exactly. Yeah. It's actually a cat in the experiment, but yeah, that's the dumbbells in the studio here. And so, like, Bitcoin is a community that you're led to, I think, by your upbringing, by your education, by whatever, and it's up to you.
So, what should somebody who wants to join the Bitcoin community, in a sense, be willing to give up?
You gotta really go. I think you're gonna deal with people.
Like it's almost like when you come into this, you're faced with like you're not gonna change it, right? It's like this saying you can't change Bitcoin, and I think that's what's kind of coming out here.
What do people give up when they join your faith community? What do you think they have to give up when they join a community like yours?
Yeah, it's clear from the scripture that you give up your old life. It even talks about the old man or the old flesh.
Does it really?
Right? And the Bible says, put off the old flesh and put on the new, right? And that's Christ's working.
That's hardcore.
But it's literally like all these things you mentioned, like sin, temptation of the flesh, whatever, all that stuff you have to put off. And that's like not humanly speaking possible, right? But through the Holy Spirit's working, it's
through the whole, truly, right? Man, there's something to that. In Bitcoin, man, it's hard to draw a parallel between like anything in Bitcoin and the Holy Spirit. We're a little outgunned on that front. But there are certain principles and dogma you have to basically abandon. One big one, obviously, is that money is something that needs to be spent for the economy to be successful. And that's hard because you literally see that everywhere you go. Anytime you deal with money, someone is either trying to get it out of your pocket for a product or service or get it out of your pocket for an equity or whatever else, a house, right? Like you guys are peddling in shelter these days. So, like when you think about those things, those are, they're commonly understood everywhere you look.
That's like a consumerist mentality, right?
But it's almost worse than that, right? At least in a consumerist mentality, you're kind of getting something that you think is good or valuable or whatever. But I think the point we're at now with money is you're just getting rid of the money for literally anything because the money's losing value so quickly. People may not be able to articulate that, but their actions demonstrate they understand it. So that's one thing you have to give up. The other thing is you have to really not be worried about being the weird guy at dinner tables, parties. Like all my friends now think I'm a Bitcoin guy. My daughter was born in November. Someone at work, unknown person, got me a Bitcoin rattle.
Oh, really?
So like, I don't even know where you get one of those.
Is this not for your kid or what?
It's for the kid.
Okay.
But like, she doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's for me, really.
Yeah.
And so like, are you the weird guy at the party? You have to be willing to accept that people will, I think, also
I think that translates to the Christian faith too, right? Like you have to be willing to stand out.
Yeah, maybe.
And martyr, right?
Yeah.
Like
at some level. Yeah.
Lay down your life.
Yeah. Do you think that, you guys have a pretty tight-knit community. You don't feel like that day to day, obviously, but you can't even.
But in society, in the world, like you're talking about at a party, but just in general and people, right? Like,
is it true? You feel like that?
Well, like
sometimes
in a sense, like the Bible speaks about like you should feel like you should suffer if you're not suffering
it's like a
for
sign.
the faith. Yeah. Right.
That's a valuable point.
It's like I'm picking up a common theme here, and the theme is reality. And it's kind of ironic that because Christians or people of religious persuasion have long been criticized for not being grounded in reality, right? You believe in some sky fairy,
prove it,
or whatever, right? And Bitcoiners like, oh, you've got this made up money,
Digital,
right? Like it's not. But these are, if you believe what we're saying, these are the people who are the most grounded in reality, and then that makes big changes to how you look at life and then how you live your life if you actually follow through. But when you're talking about the folks who want to pursue, let's say, a leftist woke ideology, right? None of that's grounded in reality, and we're seeing that very starkly with with the transgender ideology thing, where I think we've turned the corner on that now, thankfully. But it'll be something else in 10 years, right? But just how blindly people have accepted that sex is fluid, but at the same time we have to protect somebody's rights by law, because it's not that fluid. It's, it has to be enshrined in law, because
it's like it's actually somewhat viscous. So now that we're talking about it,
exactly.
not as easy as you think. So you guys are making a good point, and I think it's valuable maybe to like talk about this idea that you have to really believe in one sort of bedrock idea, whether it's you can call it reality or some like eternal truth, right? Whether it's God, whether it's not that you should be replacing God with like economic theory, but truly this does govern some portion of your life, whether you want it to or not. And so the Bitcoiners do a good job with that. I think that there's a way, like there's ways we could improve. You said, when someone comes to Bitcoin, what can they expect? One of the things I'm very critical of is the way that Bitcoiners these days are really like nuclear when it comes to whether or not somebody is going to come here and get to say the things they want, make the impression they think they need to make. And it's, by the way, getting more difficult now that Bitcoin's price is whatever, 80, 90K. It's been as high as 110 or something. When something like that expands at the rate it expanded and gets more valuable at the rate it's become more valuable, there's going to be a lot of people coming here. We don't have to down talk and sort of deride all of them because they got here late. There's value that those people are going to bring that we would not otherwise have seen. People have great ideas, whether they're financial ideas or ideas about how the code should work, ideas about, what it was, this ordinals thing on Bitcoin years ago. People are selling pictures of frogs or whatever. You do whatever you want, okay? But what never changes? The code, the blocks, all that stuff is like in stone, right? Came down on stone tablets. Is that too much? I don't know. You guys can tell me after if that was crossing the line.
That was the first download from the cloud.
There we go. See? And so these guys they know what they got right. And I think that Bitcoiners, especially if you've been around for a while, like I'm pretty malleable on the edges of Bitcoin. If you want to do stuff with payments or Lightning or whatever, these are things that new people are bringing to the space.
So basically someone coming in is like, this is a protocol that the baseline kind of remains unchanged.
Yeah.
You can't impact it. But it's kind of like a new technology layer that there's a lot of opportunity on top of it, right?
And no one can stop you. Nobody can come to you and say, you can't try this. People may suggest that you will not have success or suggest you spend your time doing something else, but they can't say, you're new, you are not allowed to make an attempt at changing even a core tenet.
So how do you say that? Like just because it's decentralized.
Yeah, you can try whatever you want. You can fork the code. You can try and make a pull request. Do whatever you want to try and change it. The same way that someone could come to Catholicism, Reform, Judaism, Islam, whatever.
Try and make some.
You can look at that.
See if you get any followers.
2,000-year-old text and say, you guys missed this line. Everyone has been reading this book for 2,000 years. There's a page here that was stuck together. You missed it. You could try. You may succeed or you may not succeed.
Yeah. See how many followers you get.
Exactly. Yeah. You let me know when you're doing the Sermon on the Mount. Okay. Then we'll talk. But for now, all you can do is try, and no one can tell you otherwise. That's all.
Well, it is. I mean, one of the things you need to do as a Christian is constantly test. So not just swallow everything whole.
Yeah.
And believe what everybody tells you, but you have to do the work. Like I see a lot of just more themes every time we talk about Christianity and Bitcoin, right? Because everybody comes to Bitcoin for the feels, for the price action, right? Almost everybody is like, it's just like, oh, it's going up. And you buy a little bit and it goes up. You're like, I'm going to get some more. And you're like, yeah. And then eventually you realize like, oh, wait, there's like way more to this. And then you get into like, economic foundations and family. Fiat money and, what's actually wrong with our system. And the same with Christianity. Most people will come, and not all of them, but a lot of people will come because and stay because they feel good and they feel community and stuff. And then they realize later, because they knew somebody, usually it's relationships. So like, okay, come to church. And then they're like, oh, wow, that was really great service. I liked it. But then eventually people realize there's a much, much deeper level. And then at some point, you have to change. And, if you're serious about it, it will change you. And it's like Christianity. And it's kind of the same for Bitcoin, right? If you're kind of serious about I don't know, when you get into it, I see it a lot, right? Like, I don't know, guys like you.
It does change you.
Yeah. And it extends to other areas of your life.
Totally.
Right. It's always like, first it's money, but then it's like productivity, like you personally, fitness is another one. I'm still working on that one, but
You got to buy some more sats or what?
Venn diagram, Mark. Venn diagram. We got to slide your circle over a little bit there. See if we can catch a little bit of that fitness one. You're right. And like the best part is that, when you guys came to my house, like we talked a little bit about this, I think, but I want to rehash it because like you're right. Christianity, and this is another thing about Bitcoin and Christianity that they share. You have to be ready to accept what you're seeing as true. And so whether it's Bitcoin, and by the way, all the economic stuff you've talked about and learned is all hogwash, or Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and all these things in the Bible are true or can be interpreted in a way that makes sense for you and makes sense for your family, and we're building on this foundation. If you're not ready for it, like I'll tell you a story, okay? When I was 20 or 21, truly wild horse days for me, okay? I didn't want to go to church anymore. And my dad said, you can stop going, but you have to talk to the priest about why you're not going to go anymore. So I said, no problem. I stopped in before my shift at Zellers, went to see the priest. My dad came with me because he wanted to make sure I went. And I thought I had performed some kind of legendary sleight of hand with this priest that I just kept on saying, okay, you're telling me you're rock solid in your beliefs, but that's all, you're just a professional believer. You can't know any of this. And you need people to believe it because otherwise you're out of a job. And he's like, you're right. You know, I do. I believe for a living, and that's what and in the moment there and for years after, I thought, man, that guy, total clown, unprepared. Like I was like 20, 21. I didn't know anything. This guy couldn't take me on. I watched a couple Sam Harris YouTube videos and I was cruising. And now in retrospect, I think like, man, that guy believes everything he says in a way that almost nobody else does. And everything he says, he believes it. And it doesn't really make his material life any better. He's trying to make your life better by believing it, not his. How many other people are doing that? Priests and Bitcoiners. And that's it. That's the list, man. Like who else is doing it? I can't think of anyone else in modern society who is truly saying to you, like, I want you to buy this bag of beliefs or Bitcoin, not because it's going to help my bag go up. If you buy it, it doesn't help me. I think it'll help you. Where else do you see that? I can't think of any. The gym, maybe. Yeah, the gym is pretty good. There's a good community of people who are like, yeah, I want you to lift 225. But really, it's like religion and Bitcoin are the places where you see this, I think, most honestly and most commonly. Bitcoiners, guys who've been around a long time and providing education for free. I always talk about Pierre Rochard and Michael Goldstein. These guys have been doing podcasts, like poorly produced podcasts on Bitcoin and Mises economics, like Misesian economics, whatever the word is, for like a decade. There was times when nobody was listening. Nobody. And now people are posting on Twitter episodes of it sounds like these guys recorded into a soup can, okay? But the stuff they're saying was right then, it was right in the meantime, and it's right now. And religion and Bitcoin, I think, have that in common. People are doing this because they want you to get it, because they've seen what it did for them. Not because, when the priest meets his maker, okay? He's at the pearly gates. I'm going into like whatever Catholicism has in terms of like afterlife predictions. But when you get to the pearly gates, okay? The Pope, Saint Peter is not up there going, yeah, you really got that guy, you sold him on Catholicism, we're taking a day off your purgatory stay. That's a way to go on that one. Nice, here's a bat. That doesn't happen. Like that guy doesn't care about what happens to him at that point. He's all in. Whether you're in or not, he's all in. And so I think he's got that right. And Bitcoiners, the ones who really care about pushing the mission forward, they've got it right too. And you just don't see it anywhere else. That's one thing that I really like about Bitcoin that not a lot of people talk about. I don't get anything out of you buying. I just think it's good for you. It was good for me. Maybe it'll help you too. When I tell you drink more water, you're not like, I want to see how much Big Water is paying you. like you really should think about changing your message.
Yeah,
if you want people to drink water, you can't be so extreme about water. Like, no, you should be drinking water. There is no like, degree of whether or not I should be telling you water is good for you or not. It's just good. Faith, as far as the priest is concerned, is good for you. He's doing it for you. Bitcoin, as far as the Bitcoiner are concerned, is good for you. It's doing it for you, not for himself. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, so I want to pick up on, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, and I want to talk about this too. Just about masculinity.
Love it.
What are your thoughts? Like,
What are yours?
is
you tell me what yours are first. What is it?
Okay,
I like to know what other people think. I know what I think. I'm rock solid in that belief on my part. I want to know what you think.
Okay, I know it's benching 2 plates. Okay, I got it.
That's just for fun. But what is it? What outside of that? What is it?
So, well, it's interesting, right? Because you have the Tate brothers.
Yeah.
Who are, there's the U.S. is putting pressure on.
They're coming back.
Yeah, on Romania to release them into Florida.
Saw that.
Or, sorry, into the States. And Florida is like, no, these guys. But we see this sort of brand of masculinity that is very, like I would say, it's very self-aggrandizing. And you have models like Andrew Tate and his brother as well, right? Who are essentially pimps, who are like, they're not a model for masculinity at all. And I used to think masculinity was, well, you gotta be able to lift a certain amount of weight and grow a certain size of beard.
Great beard Joey. Over there, yeah.
Right?
A lot of jealous. Naked chins, this side of the table. Yeah, you guys are both growing something.
But I mean, masculinity for the Christian is very different, right? And you can look at sort of the Stoic virtues of courage and temperance, and there's 4 of them anyways. But then because I've been studying a particular book in the Bible, going through 2 Timothy, and then it talks about qualifications for office bearers,
leaders in the church,
but and men, and it's like kindness, gentleness, forbearance, these things, right? And you're like, well, that's not the typical man who's out there like wrestling a bear and doing stuff, right? So I think for me, what masculinity boils down to, and this also has people can shoot me for saying this, but has implications on relations between men and women in marriage, right? I view male headship as a thing.
Headship is like you're the leader of the household?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you steer the boat. How that practically works, that doesn't mean you're domineering. But what it really boils down to is self-sacrifice, right? C.S. Lewis said that motherhood is the job that society exists to protect and to push forward. Everything else revolves around that. I kind of think so, right? I think of my family, like our primary goal, my goal is to make sure my wife has enough resources, tools, whatever she needs to do her job. And it's also my job of raising the children, but primarily it falls on the mother in the younger age. So that means it's self-sacrifice. So I will do whatever I have to for my wife. And that's a different way to look at male headship, where you're like, no, I make the decisions and I'm this and I'm that, right? It's like, no, because our example is Jesus Christ, right? He could have been the ultimate macho man, right? Well, because he had, if you believe, then you're like, well, he could have come in either as a conquering warrior, which people wanted, right? As a soldier with an army, and destroyed the Romans and restored Israel to its glory. He didn't do that. And he was humble. He wasn't much to look at, really. He wasn't a big burly dude with he probably had a beard, but, right. He wasn't all of that. So we kind of take our cue from that. And the biggest theme of Jesus' life was sacrifice. He sacrificed himself for people who didn't even deserve it, who didn't care, who spat on him, but he did it for me. So for us, it's like the best thing a man can do is to be prepared to sacrifice himself. And so that entails a few things, I think. So that means, I think if you're a man, as much as possible, you should be physically fit and be prepared to defend your family in a physical way. You should have education in like finances, in, I don't have a gun. I really want to learn. I want to get that pistol license, learn how to shoot a gun, but be able to build things or be able to provide for your family in some way or another. For some people, that's more like The STEM kind of things, I'm more of a hands-on guy.
Sure, yeah.
But I wouldn't say that it's not what I look like, right? It's not like having a Harley
totally
and being big and burly and
you have to set an example for your family, right? As the man. I just became a father a few months ago, and it's changed some of my perspectives, but I think I had some of these kind of brewing already, like this sort of idea that traditional masculinity is not the Tate brothers. It's not the red pill, right? The red pill is this semi-coherent set of ideologies that is basically like whatever you do as a man has to be for you first, and women and relationships and success will come after. There's some truth to that. But again, it's domineering in a way that I think masculinity now should be trying to steer away from, because marriage especially is a partnership. And if you hope to get married, you have to be a competent man and a competent partner in a way that you're just not going to be if you're thinking about these things in this way. So there's a couple things I'd say about masculinity in general, and then maybe we'll dive into like where you should be in like your 30s, right? Because those are two different things. In your teens and 20s, when you're sort of finding your footing as a man, you're going to take some lumps and find yourself with some scars, and that's okay. You're going to find yourself in situations where you're tempted, like I said earlier, by women, tempted by substances, tempted by all manner and spectrum of bad decisions. They're going to be everywhere. And you're going to say yes to a lot more of those things than you should. That's okay in your teens and 20s. When it starts to become not okay is when it's costing you in terms of what your future could have delivered you as a husband instead of as a quote unquote man, right? You see this a lot now because family formation's at a pretty significant low. We have a super low birth rate here. People are not interested necessarily in getting married and uprooting because they don't want to live in an apartment and can't necessarily afford a house, stuff like this. You guys know all this stuff. But what it says to me that people do this anyway is that there is like a genetic predisposition in both men and women to want this. Because what it means is you're prolonging the species to marry, have kids, raise the kids right, put them in a situation where they can succeed and have your good decisions compound for generations to come, right? This is what it means to be a man now. I would put to young guys like, 20, 25 years old now, I would put to them this question. At 35, do you want to wake up to a woman who loves you in a household that you built together with a child or 2 kids or 3 kids or 5 kids or like whatever? I don't know how many kids you guys have, but like more than one, I'm sure. If you want to wake up in that household, start making decisions now that are going to put you in that situation, because that takes time to build. You take time to become that person. It takes time for your wife to become that person. My wife, you guys met her. She was a career woman. Lead dog at a small advertising firm, like never really gave much thought to kids, never really gave much thought to like staying home, raising them. It took all of 2 weeks maybe after my daughter was born for my wife to start saying like, how can we make it work that I can stay home 3 days a week or 4 days a week or not go back to work full time, just work like freelance or something. That's a genetic predisposition. You have that same genetic predisposition as a man to be the head of household, to steer the ship, right? You are holding the oar no matter how rough the waters get. That's your job. That doesn't mean necessarily that you got to squat 2 wheels or bench 2 wheels or whatever, but it does mean that you have
write this down.
Yeah, quote me on that. Turn the TikTok camera on. Let's get that one down. The thing that it means is that you have to have the temperament, the discipline, and the sort of, level-headedness is too broad a term, but it works here, to never let outside things influence what happens in your household. That's getting harder, thanks to sort of the broad societal shift to the left that may be coming back the other way now, who knows? But that's your job as a man, to protect your household. Protecting your household used to mean from wild animals, barbarian raiders, and whatever foreign entity was trying to enter your
British,
your homestead, right? Yeah. And now it means when your daughter or your son comes home and says they heard something at school, saw something on TV that didn't sit right with them, can you bring them back home? When your wife says to you that she, thinks that it'd be a good idea for her to stay home and raise the kids, can you make the jump from whatever you're earning now to whatever you need to be earning to make that a reality? By the way, motherhood, like derided in society now by basically everybody, it's almost impossibly stupid to have this point of view that as a mother, the first thing you should do is think about daycare, school, and getting back into the workforce. The most beautiful thing that I have ever seen is the transformation my wife made from like sort of hard-edged, needed to be sharp at work to now mother of our child. That there is no coming back from that once you make the transformation in a natural world. But because of perverse incentives, perverse money, you have this need to put women and men to some extent, into this 50-hour-a-week hellhole. Can I say hell? Hellhole. That just doesn't give you anything in terms of like the spiritual hole inside of you, the family hole inside of you. It's your job as a man, I think, to make sure that that hole gets filled at the household level. Don't ever put yourself or your wife or your kid in a situation where they have to do something that is not beneficial because they don't have the resources or because you couldn't sort of reel them back in and ground them, right? And to people who are listening from our show, the CVP, you may view this as domineering, right? Great word. You may view this as, well, it sounds to me like you're ruling with an iron fist. It's only an iron fist if the ends are sort of like incorrect or obviously perverted or whatever. But how is any of this a perverted end? A strong family that prolongs good decisions, that makes my great-great-grandfather proud, and my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father. Why should you, as a man, as a competent man, give up generations of good decision making because you'd rather go out and find a one-night stand than you would make the sacrifices, put the bottle down, get a second income stream, find a nice girl who cares about you the same way you care about her. Your bloodline is not celebrating you coming home at 3 a.m. and being hungover till 4 o'clock the next day before you call a low-wage foreigner to bring you Taco Bell in the snow. Okay? That's not what your bloodline is applauding. They are applauding the good decisions you make. And the good decisions are the hard ones. That's what leads you to a strong household. That's being a man is making a good decision when it's hard to make a good decision. It's, by the way, the bar has never been lower for this. Okay? Like 95% of people are making the wrong decision at almost every opportunity. It's not that hard to make the right decision 25%
So
of the
I'm
time.
curious why you kind of excuse younger people then. Like you kind of say, okay,
I had something to
teens,
say about that
20s.
too.
I was like, okay, so where does that
because
like
because when I was a kid,
yeah.
when our
but like where is kid turn into adult? Like
it used to be at like 15.
Yeah.
Because
or 12
or even younger, right?
Yeah.
Because what happened when you turned 12 in 1900? What happened?
You're doing everything.
Get out there, get the rake, the hoe, the hose, whatever, start working. Because if you don't, we ain't eating. And by the way, I'm 50 now. I'm dying in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay? So you need to start working.
Yeah.
That happened back then. Now, I mean, what's kids at 20 years smoking dope and playing Fortnite? That's almost worse, by the way, than going out to the bar and doing things you shouldn't be doing in terms of like other temptations. Because at least then you're learning a lesson. At least then you're learning through pain or learning through experience.
Interacting with human beings.
What are you learning? High as a kite, playing Battle Royale in your parents' basement. Nothing. And so I give kids a bit of a pass in their 20s because, yeah, that used to be when you came of age a little bit. And you were forced to come of age because your parents were still part of this generation where like they were told at 18, you either start paying rent or you get out. And there's no two ways about this. My parents were like that. My parents were working as soon as they turned, but they're 12 years old, paper routes, Dickie D, this, that,
Would you do the same for your kid too? Like,
it is really hard.
12?
It's really hard to think about my kid not being productive in some way as soon as they're able.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are not 100 years old, okay?
Well,
Whatever. When you were younger, okay, Brent, I'll talk to you. When you were younger, did you have a paper route when you were 10?
I picked up stones when I was 7.
Yeah?
Yeah, in a field.
I had a paper route. I used to deliver Sears catalogs in my neighborhood. And Then I had a second one when it came available. Then I had a third one. And so suddenly I was delivering papers like every weekend and I hated it. But then like something would come to the store that I would want. And my friends would say like, oh, have you seen this in the Toys R Us catalog? Toys R Us was still open back then. Like, oh, you want this game, you want this thing, you want this whatever. I gotta wait for my birthday. Well, I don't. I'll just go get it if I want it. It's $8 or $10, whatever stuff costs. Then I could go. That's when you start to see, right? So when I think about my own daughter, like I don't know. Then there's the piece of like, do you raise your daughter to be the nurturing feminine type, or do you raise her to be like corporate killer type? I don't know. I could probably do either one. But what does she want? What's best for her for when she turns 30? Because that's what I have to think about. She's not going to think about that. She's going to think about what's good for her right then and there. You know, if I'm lucky at 12 years old, a week from now or whatever.
So
right?
why do you think people are like, we could go on forever, but why do you think people are like postponing marriage, family, kids?
Because there's so much stuff to do. Why would you
into adult? Like, so one example,
postponing adulthood.
Why would you not?
The
failure to launch phenomenon comes from the ease that you can like dull your mind now. Before, if you were like, I don't know, our age, right? We're about the same
but
age.
it's also, no, there's also like, I'm just thinking of one example. I had a tenant one time. They were in there, they were 42 and 40, right? And he's just finishing up his residency as a doctor, kind of getting settled. She's got like this, she did like a consultancy, like actress, whatever, I don't know, all this stuff. So quite like, you know, professional people, like very high functioning. So I wouldn't say they're like kind of into substances.
They're not bums,
right? Like they're not, but like then they hit 40 and she's like, I want to have a kid. And they did have a kid, but it was like,
what do you think it is?
I don't know. That's why you're on the show.
Every woman has that clock, right? For sure. Anyone who denies that is like it's completely ridiculous to deny this. But the other thing is that some people just find that you can't be further stimulated by your professional endeavors, right? The same way that, I still play video games. You guys came to my house. I got a PS5 there, big TV. I love a good like 1.5 to 2 hour video game session from like 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock on Friday night. I don't have to get up early the next day. I don't have to work. I don't have to do anything for the podcast on Saturday morning. I love that. But I know that if I do that every night, it'll get less and less enjoyable. I will be less and less productive, and I will need to find stimulation some other place. These guys have found the stimulation in their professional endeavors. They've got each other. They're in a good spot, so they want to have a kid. I'm good with that. The thing I think is more concerning is that kids now, and like again, I'm not trying to give kids a free pass. They don't need a free pass. What they need is a wake-up call. And that wake-up call is going to be, none of my friends have girlfriends. All my friends are playing video games all night. None of my friends have houses, even though everyone that's like 10 years older than me seems to have figured it out around this age. We didn't figure it out. Like that's what I don't want to see that, but I don't see how you get out of it. Where's the nudge for these kids? Mom and dad are working tons of hours. Mom and dad may also be this sort of like get baked on a Friday night type that you see way more often now. I'm not convinced there's a way out of this for a lot of those kids. And I don't think like the government thinks there's a way out of it either. I'm not 100% sure they would prefer to just keep importing like migrants to fill like basic job roles at Tim Hortons or McDonald's or Uber Eats, whatever. But they seem to have no choice, at least for the time being.
There's no teenagers.
Yeah, I know. Military age guys. But it's interesting, right? There's like a very rapid shift that we had not seen in generations past. It took 100 years basically to go from being productive at 12 and still at, when I turned 18 in 2005, I was still expected to like either go to university, find a job, or start paying rent. That's not quite picking tomatoes on the farm, but it's a lot closer than the 18-year-olds only 20 years later not being expected to do anything. In fact, the suggestion is just wait, take an off year, find yourself, figure it out. You want to do something that's going to make you happy. What makes these guys happy is Fortnite and pot and porn.
That circles back to the purple hair.
This is not a sustainable thing for society. And again, to kind of tie a knot on this, it's why imparting on your kids that making a good decision, even 25% of the time, will pay dividends in a way that you cannot imagine. And once they see it, It's like working out. Once someone tells you you have a bicep vein, you're in the gym 20 hours a week. Okay. You're not going back to like the sedentary lifestyle. You're not doing it. Kids and young adults, same thing. You make that decision a few times, the benefits will show up, and it's up to parents, I think, to get their kids in that spot.
Exactly. It's up to parents, because I want to take a little bit of issue about what you said earlier, right?
No.
When you're in your 20s, you get a pass, right? Like, yeah, that's kind of where we are now, but that's sort of the infantilization of our society. So I'll blame boomers. Everybody loves to hate on boomers. I'll blame them too, and their parenting skills. And then the next generation has the kids that we're talking about, right? Where it's perfectly like they don't have any expectations. I'm being very broad here, right? But
Sure.
There's not a lot of expectations of somebody at 18 or at 20. And if they're smoking weed in the basement, well, at least they're safe, right? This maternal emphasis on safety, right?
It is true. We just saw this, by the way.
They're vaccinated. They're safe. They're
yeah, exactly. And so, that's nothing against maternal instincts, but at some point the father has to take over and be like, no, now you got to get ready for the world. Mm-hmm. But that starts early, right?
It should.
And that's so that by the time the kid is 18, they have the skills, and I'm really thinking through this with my children, right? I have an older son, but then I have 4 younger children, like 10 and under. And so for them, we're really like thinking about this, and like, if I want them to be a certain way at 16, or to have certain values or skills at 18, or, can they take a punch at 18, mm-hmm. or a mental punch from somebody? If I died, what would happen to them? Right? Would they be able to survive? And I think so, yeah, by 18, I want them to know how to budget, how to cook, how to drive a car, how to build a doghouse. Or
is that enough to send them out into the world?
Or yeah, and then, but also have other skills, right? So
so my question to you, my pushback would be, the reason that you don't see this as often anymore, and even in households that have strong parental influence, is the parents don't know what to teach the kids.
Yeah, 100%.
Because things are changing so fast now, right? You guys have kids. I'm way further away from this than you guys are. But in 18 years, like if I have to start sort of like training my daughter or guiding her in a direction that's going to make her successful, you're throwing darts now.
You are and you aren't.
It's for some things like budgeting. And driving. You said driving a car. You're not going to need to know that. That's obsolete. You're done with that. So that's a miss by you. That is a miss by you.
When the apocalypse comes, people are going to know how to drive stick shift, because that'll be the only thing that will work. All these self-driving cars.
I don't remember. I don't remember seeing in Deuteronomy that Jesus was a huge fan of manual transmissions, but I'll let that slide. So let me ask you this: when you talk about that was good, that manual transmission line. When you talk about teaching your daughter, there's stuff that, like, of course, parents can teach their kids, right? It's really, you're giving them a model from which to work on all things, whether it's finding a job, partner, whatever. That's good. That's good parenting. But I think the concern that parents have, and it's a good one, is it enough in a world that's changing as fast as it is? I don't know, honestly. And so when I think about careers, even my own career, am I going to be doing what I'm doing now in 5 years? Am I even going to be allowed to be doing what I'm doing now in 5 years? Whether it's my day job or even the podcast, like some of the stuff that gets fed to the CBP show for like AI tools, I'm pretty sure that I could pay a couple $100 a month and get some rough facsimile of Len and I talking for an hour on a script if we just fed it stories. I wouldn't have to show up at all, right? And so like these things are happening so fast. Parents are probably a little worried about that, and so they're frozen. I think that's probably one of the problems, but I don't know. What do you think? You think like when you think about like what are you giving your kids? You're giving them a model to work from. You guys are right about that. But what else? Is that enough to send them out into the world now?
Well, it has to be.
I guess.
Right?
What else can you give them?
Well, exactly. So I think you build the foundation, and there's some specific things like driving a car, which, okay, maybe they won't need to know that, but there's specific skills that I mentioned.
Sure.
But the non-specific skills are mainly the ones that you model, that they learn from you. So that means you can't be playing video games every night because they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. My kids, like especially my 10-year-old, He's a lot like me. And like he'll say something or he'll teach a moral lesson to one of the other kids, right? Like, I don't know, like just, suck it up or something where he'll just, I'm like, oh, I said that to him like whatever time ago, right? So
like go to your room.
Yeah.
No, but
get in the basement.
I don't know, but just providing them a broad base. So I mean, liberal or a classical education. We've talked about that with my wife. I don't know, maybe, but certainly, like, what can you do? You can read to your baby. Right?
Yeah, of course.
And that's the biggest thing people can do for the kids is actually to read from. All my kids are readers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get cell phones. And I'm not saying I've figured everything out, but this is one thing I know, that there is no. I
You have the
blow my
mother of all
mind
cell
out
phones.
with social media and stuff, but they don't get to. But they know they're not going to have one until they're at least 16 or 18,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're bored sometimes. And so all we do is we just provide them a house that has toys like Lego, video
creative
games,
endeavors, right? Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
right? My son is making a language. He knows like, I don't know how many different alphabets. He's got my linguistics textbook from university. He's read it back to front. He's done his alphabet. He's got most of the sounds figured out. He's now working through scripts and like just stuff like that, right? Like I'm tooting his horn a little bit, but no, but it's like you don't know what your kids are capable of if you don't stick sticking that screen in front of them. I've seen
disaster.
people do that at
It's
1 or 2 years
disaster.
because they're making a noise. I can't deal with it. But that comes from their parents probably and their lack of parenting skills. So it's like we can reset things and we can make adults functional at 20 years old. But it has to start from somewhere, like you having the kids and then being like, okay, I'm not going to do this or that. I need to have these skills. And, for us, it's also our values, right? The most important thing I can do for my kids is to teach them about Jesus and how to love Jesus and kind of, their eternal salvation is the most important thing. But then it's to realize, okay, once you have that sort of set, we got a job to do in the 80 or 120, whatever years that we're on this earth, right? So
there's this
Brent.
instilling discernment, I think is you talk about reading and giving them creative tools and all this different stuff. And like, I think at the end of the day, it's, for us, the faith based deciding between right and wrong, right? Like, this is the decision. Like it might be AI, whatever, taking my job. Like what is in front of me? And now what tools did my parents impart to me to make a right or a wrong decision, right? And that right and wrong, I think where this is so hard for people is that like, if the parents don't have a clear idea themselves and a firm conviction, like you talk about that priest, whatever, right? Like, what do you believe to be right and wrong about the world? Like what is true, right? And if you can't impart that to the kid and say, okay, child, you're 5 years old. Like I told you to empty the dishwasher. Like, do you do it or not? Right? Like, what is the right thing to do? Obey your parents or disobey, right? Like, it's as simple as that. Like, there's so many examples you can just go through the list, right? But that way, when they're 10, like, do you go do this with your friends or do you do that, right? And equipping them with that decision-making skill, I think is like, there's no way we're going to give them like the skills they need for their job in 20 years. But I think it's just giving them the ability to decide right and wrong. I think
you're 100% right about that. I'll push back on you too in only one way. This is a less complex decision because of the tight-knit community you're a part of for you guys.
And I would say our faith, like
for sure,
right? Like if I want to know what's right and wrong, I don't have to look inside myself and decide how I'm feeling that day. I just go to the Word of God and be like, well, this is the truth.
It's here,
right?
Yeah,
like that's what I believe.
Yeah.
So it's not like I go and kind of go into myself for 5 years when I'm in my 20s and decide what's true for me.
There's value in that. You shouldn't need to. I shouldn't say you shouldn't need to, because there's nothing wrong with going to the gospel or the Bible. But like those things are in a lot of ways baked into your humanity. Everyone should know what the right and wrong thing
you have
to do.
A conscience.
You know, exactly, right? And so you could say whether you believe that was divinely imparted or that it's the result of this primordial lottery, That's on, I don't care. But the idea that you don't have this internal compass is not true. You have it. And parents have it. So you guys are right. The decision-making model is an important thing to impart. The thing I was more trying to say is like, kids, when you talk about kids getting a pass, I don't want to give them a pass, but I see why they think they should have a pass. It's partially because of what was before them, right? Yep. But it's also what they see in front of them. They see all the boomers. I got a 6-bedroom house. I never go upstairs because my knees hurt. Okay, like it's unused. The government. I'm voting against being taxed on this thing all the time. Whatever. That's the incentives. It's driving the outcomes. They see that and they're like, well, I'm not going to go into the workforce because I can never get that anyways. And they look back and they see like these stories about, well, what did you do for work, Dad? That we have this $3 million house in Hamilton. Oh, I worked at the Fasco 30 hours a week, driving a tow motor. I was a flag man in the loading or whatever, right? Like,
did you go to school for that?
I got to sleep during night shift.
Yeah, like I was asleep for 3 hours every night at work on these times have passed, right? And so people are correctly, I think, jaded about what their outcomes will be, even if they take the hardest road, which leads them to take the easiest road. Because how much worse can it be, right?
Enter Bitcoin?
Maybe. We'll see, right? We'll see if it helps people. I think there's a possibility that it does. I am not one of these people who's like, you should have all of your money in Bitcoin 100% of the time. That's crazy. This thing is 15 years old-ish, 16 years old if you go back to the white paper date. I think it's a pretty rock solid way to save a lot of your money, but you need also firepower for things like family desires, right? I want to put a certain style of life around my family. I want to be able to support my kids in their sports or school or whatever, right? I don't know. The bird costume's not cheap. They don't take Bitcoin at the costume store or whatever, right? So like you got to have that. You guys are in real estate. Real estate gets a bad rap in Bitcoin because it's, as the Bitcoiners
it gets a bad rap in real estate too. Huh?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like the Bitcoin guys, when they talk about your life, your terms, they call it your liability, government's terms. And they're right in some respects.
They are, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so but again, you're being driven into these things. And the idea that you should, discard this real estate investing or equity investing or whatever, because, it's a SHIT coin to buy anything that's not BTC. It's not realistic. And this is another indicator that people have this sort of nihilism about their financial life and about their personal romantic family life. Like, how much worse can it get if I just buy whatever meme token instead of Bitcoin? Believe me, it can get worse, okay? Like, there are things you can do to make life better. Not everything is just zero or worse. You got to try and make things better for yourself.
So I take your point about having a community, and it's true, right? That we have a community and there's common values, and then like you see other people's kids. Yeah, I think it's a lot easier because, well, just having a community where you can be like, oh, can someone watch my kids? Or like, there's always going to be someone to kind of backstop you.
Yeah.
In one way or another. But then part of raising kids too, just getting back to that as well, is modeling to them that you don't just take care of you, or you don't just take care of your family. You do things for other people, right? Because you talk about kids now who are kind of left in the lurch and they've not been given any of the skills by their parents, and it's generational. And like what do you do with those people, right? You can't just be like, well, sucks to be you guys, right? Or people who legitimately are going to have a hard time taking care of themselves, right? Is that the government's job? No, it's not. Charity is not the government's job.
No.
Charity is our job. And so, you talk about being a man. As a man, you not only have to be able to take care of your family, you have to have surplus capacity for whatever happens, but also to take care of other people. And that's another thing we try to model to our kids as well, or just directly show them, right? Like
they see it everywhere, right? In your community.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
like, I don't want to say like our community is like this holy community of perfect people. Like, it's not.
It's not perfect.
We're broken people.
No one's saying it's perfect, but it's funny if you can make Mark press the button, that means you have like some time to talk. Once he presses the button back, it's his turn. So if you have a community that's like strong, foundationally strong, again, like the Venn diagram, family to family is 80, 90% more in some cases. You don't have to worry about like sending your kid, right? Little Mark goes away to whatever, play GoldenEye at little Johnny's house after school. You don't have to worry that Johnny's going to be like, have you seen what you can search on Google? Do you want to see it? Like, you don't have to worry about that because that family shares your values. The temptation is minimized. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying you guys are like, you know, an idealistic sort of, you know, end game for what a community should look like. Why shouldn't you feel like that? I mean, we're talking about whether I'm religious or not, we're talking about all the same things. I would love for my kid to go family to family, school to school, whatever, and know that no matter who she runs into, that this is what they're going to get, right? You try and do that with your friend group, even if you're not religious, right? You try and keep a tight group of friends. Your family's aligned with you, generally speaking. And that's good. But man, there's a lot of things I would love about a community that's like really grounded in these sort of spiritual ways of thinking, long time horizon, eternity level time horizon ways of thinking, behaving, supporting each other.
It just like when you have an eternal perspective, it equips you to deal with any situation, right? In a way that like, yeah, you share the same values. And I'm thinking like, you know, okay, I know Mark believes the same thing and his mindset's the same way. If something came up, I would know how he would be wired to respond, right? And I've been listening to a couple shows, podcasts about like just talking about immigration and like the mixing of cultures and stuff. And it keeps like coming back to like, well, there's no shared values or culture, right? And it's just like, well, come to think of it, people actually do value that, right? So it's like diversity. We've had like immigration. It's worked. Like we've talked about on the show, like how it has worked in the past really well and whatever. We're immigrants and whatever, right? But if you don't have this kind of like, it's almost like a craving inside of people to have shared value, right? Like I can trust you to babysit my kids.
Tribal,
like,
man.
Okay,
You're tribal.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I think immigration is a topic that, for like again, you're fighting against your instincts all the time. Like again, this is not about skin color. This is the thing that drives me nuts. People think it's about skin color. It's not. It's about cultural values. Some black communities behave in a way that invites better, you know, like more black people to come and live there because they like being around that. When I go to, I used to, when I was a kid, when I was playing basketball, I used to go to Carabana in Toronto. I went there once or twice over the course of a 3-year period, and then again later on. When you go to Carabana, that's black culture, Jamaican culture. That's a strong culture. When you go to Carabana, do you think you see a lot of like white people? Is there a lot of like crickies in the, you know, little Vander, you know, like you think? Does it mean that the crickies in the Vander Woods are like, does that make you a racist for not showing up? Yeah. Does it make the black community racist for not incorporating your beliefs into their Carabana Fest? Yeah. No. It's just that's a certain culture. Then I look over at like, I don't know, Indian culture. There's a lot of Indian immigrants now. People are talking about that. Yeah, people see the disgusting street food videos online. Okay, you don't have to eat the Indian street food if you go there. But Indian culture is a lot more than just that, right? I have some friends who came from India in the 90s, guys I've been friends with my entire life. That's a distinct culture, the way they treat their family, the way they eat, that's just because when I go there, they expect me to use my hands for the rice, doesn't mean that they hate the white man, you know? And just because I would prefer to use a fork at my own house, doesn't mean that I'm anti-Indian culture. These are distinct cultures. Whites have a distinct culture, Indians, blacks, Jews, Christians, Muslims, like everyone has these cultural norms, values, tribes. The idea that like people who are against immigration, especially at these levels, are racist or what's the other, xenophobic or whatever, which I think is like a, you know, branch of racism. It's like a satellite branch, you know, this is not true. It's just not what people actually think, you know. It's ridiculous, and it's like another divisive wedge. No one cares where you come from as long as you come here and you're Canadian first. When you're with the Canadians, you're Canadian. When I go to the U.S., okay, I can't go to a restaurant and say, "Sir, can you please put your pistol away?" Like in the States, they open carry, and so if you don't want to be where they open carry, don't go to the States. If you don't want to be where the street food's bad, don't go to India. If you don't want to be where people are napping in the middle of the day, don't go to Italy. Yeah, like it's not that hard. And when you go to Italy and it's 2:00 and people are napping, like you're not knocking on the shop door, you're having a nap. When in Rome, you behave as the Romans do, not as the Canadians do. And I think a lot of people need to just get this through their head, man. It's not anti-immigration anything. And by the way, it's not just like native Canadians, quote unquote, who think this. It's old stock immigrants from the 80s, 90s. It's new immigrants from the 2000s, 20s. Like you talk to any of these people, like they're humans. What are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you like, yeah, we're having a party for all the Indian immigrants in the park. Like you can come if you want, but we're going to be eating this and drinking this and playing these games and doing this dance, listening to this music. If you show up there and are like, would you mind putting on a little Tragically Hip? Do you think it's going to go over that well? Like, have you heard the good news about Gord Downey? No one's like, you're not doing that. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make them bad. It's just like, that's what culture is. Are we not supposed to be, what are we? We're a mosaic, right? That's what people say.
Cultural mosaic.
Mosaic. Yeah. Are we not supposed to be a mosaic? The problem when you have immigration at these levels is you got places like Brampton that are no longer a mosaic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And places like, certain parts of Hamilton that are no longer a mosaic.
Or bloody mosaic.
And so you wind up with these problems, and every culture deserves to have a chance to stay intact and share the best, and nothing wrong with this stuff. But you turn on the news and everyone's like, if you don't want 1 million immigrants here, you should lose your job.
Yeah.
Why? Who cares, man? Like, just get over it already.
Oh, man.
So I will say, for a country, I think for a country to prosper, it needs to have a culture and a vision, and none of this post-national
vision's
state
right word
nonsense.
Though.
Yeah. But then something that binds you together. And I've been thinking like, what is that for Canada? That's a little harder to decide. But when it comes to Christianity, I mean, that's my first thing, but also Bitcoin, it's like you welcome everybody from every tribe and nation and tongue and culture, right? To I don't care where you're from, and keep your traditions or whatever.
Yeah.
But come on in, and here are some common values that we can all share, and that's kind of it's a beautiful thing, right? When you have not just a racially homogenous group of people getting together in community, but when you have people from sort of all over the world. And that's why this whole diversity is our strength. It's so painful.
It's never been.
It's never been, but it can be a beautiful thing. And the idea for the cultural mosaic is a beautiful vision, but not for diversity's sake.
No.
Right? It's diversity within the framework of something else.
When you take the best ideas from, I won't call them rival cultures, but in some respects they are, you're going to improve. And when you share a vision, like you said, great word, you can overcome cultural differences that would otherwise be, they would be difficult to overcome in situations where things were not going the right direction, where things were not going well. And you see that, in a Canada where GDP per capita is going up by 3% a year, do you think that there's discussion of why everywhere you go in Brampton, there's like an Indian guy working at Tim Hortons? Do you think there's memes about Sing Hortons doubles always being wrong in a Canada where GDP is 3% every year, per capita every year? There's not, because no one cares if things are going well and everyone's contributing to the upswing. But when things are not going well, people rightfully look around and go, what changed? And in this case, this changed. And so laser focus on this. This is a problem now. It's not always a problem. People come from other countries. They do good work here. We're a country of immigrants. My grandparents are immigrants. Your grandparents are immigrants, whatever. But shared vision used to be something that was the key focus of immigration and policy around immigration. It's just not anymore. It's how much cheap labor can we get, or whatever these guys are thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's the messaging, right? There's no messaging about a shared vision. The shared vision is cheap labor.
Yeah.
Or, a
scammy
way to
identity.
get citizenship. Yeah. So then how can you?
Do you remember? Yeah. I don't want to keep you guys all day, but do you remember when for the last 6 years or so, 5 years or so, basically since the immigration really landed for a lot of Canadians that are otherwise apathetic to most political discourse, there was discussion from the PMO about Canada's values they're fluid, right? We don't have any national identity. We're a country of immigrants. We're post-national. You said it. And there was a long stretch of time there, almost a decade, where anyone who said anything about Canada being a nation of Canadians was like derided in the public space. Now, the same guy, the same guy who had me talking about how Canada is not a country with any harsh identity or like identifiable traits, talking about how Canadians are not a nationality, demanding that I fly the flag at half staff for 6 months at a time for unknown reasons at this point. I won't get into that, but boy, could I get into it. And talking about how we need to unite together, because if we don't, the only vehicles we have really are winning this meaningless hockey game and taking liquor from red states off the LCBO shelves. Good luck with that.
How about the flag? Remember the racist flag? The Canadian flag is a racist thing?
Don't get me started.
All of a sudden, all these guys are flying Canadian flags.
The difficulty that this country has had because of leadership that was misguided in the most generous interpretation, which I will leave there for now. The damage is going to be long-standing.
Yeah.
You got entire communities, Aboriginal communities especially, that really united behind this like mass grave thing. They didn't find any bodies. I don't know if I'm breaking news to your listeners, but like we didn't find anything. There was a recent attempt to start a dig at a school, I think in Saskatchewan, and the local community there had the school designated a historical site, no digging allowed. Okay, you make of that what you will. The flag at half staff, like you said, racism, destroying statues of all great Canadian leaders over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Basically since George Floyd, right?
Yep.
That was the sort of turning point. That was the lever for a lot of this stuff. And we've really gone the wrong direction. You know, we could tie a bow on this. Bitcoin doesn't care about these things. Bitcoin is like religion in that it's been here longer than whatever thing is driving discourse now. It will be here to help guide you through these rough waters. And when you come out the other side, it will still be here for the good times too. And you have a choice as a Canadian. Either you embrace these things, faith, Bitcoin, family, community, and don't worry about the outside noise, or you get completely caught up and you go into a rough period as a father and a husband and you come out with purple hair and body piercings. And you decide, okay, listener, viewer, which choice you want to make. But I'll tell you that there is a choice to be made there, and you have to make it every single day.
Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap.
Yeah.
Brent, you have anything to add there?
No, man. You're supposed to wrap it. Good.
Wrap it? Excellent. Okay. This has been great, Joey. Where can people find you?
Canadian Bitcoiners Podcast, best place to find me. Twitter, Joey Tweets with 3 E's. And if you have questions about Bitcoin, like people from the Two Stewards community, me and Len are helping people all the time for free. There's places that charge. I see the show inbox. Len is helping people Sunday mornings free of charge. So just let me know and we'll get you sorted out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Joey. It's been great. And to our viewers, thanks for hanging out. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.